When men stop chasing, nothing suddenly breaks or crashes. There is no loud argument and no dramatic confrontation. No doors are slammed and no explanations are demanded. Instead, something changes quietly beneath the surface. The pressure eases. The constant push fades away. The emotional noise softens. And without any announcement, the world begins to respond in a different way. This is not about men quitting on life, and it is not about rejecting love, goals, connection, or purpose. It is about what naturally happens when pursuit comes to an end. Many people believe that when men stop chasing, everything falls apart. They assume motivation disappears, interest dies, ambition weakens, and momentum is lost. But that belief is based on misunderstanding. What actually happens is far quieter and far more revealing. When men stop chasing, they stop performing for outcomes. They stop over-explaining themselves. They stop trying to earn acceptance, affection, or validation that was never meant to be negotiated. In that absence of effort, systems begin to adjust. Some dynamics loosen. Some relationships drift away. Some expectations collapse because they can no longer support themselves. At the same time, something else stabilizes. Men start moving with intention instead of urgency. They choose more carefully. They respond rather than pursue. This is not about power or control. It is not revenge. It is not emotional withdrawal driven by resentment. It is alignment. And once that alignment settles in, everything around it begins to shift, whether it resists or not. The first real change happens internally. Before the outside world reacts, before anyone else notices, something settles inside the man himself. The constant mental noise reduces. Men stop running endless calculations in their minds about what to say, when to respond, how to phrase things correctly, and how to keep energy alive. Chasing demands alertness. It keeps the mind slightly tense, always on standby, always preparing the next move. When pursuit ends, that tension releases quietly. Men notice they are no longer rehearsing conversations ahead of time. They are no longer checking emotional conditions before speaking honestly. They stop adjusting themselves in the middle of a thought just to maintain harmony. That space creates clarity. Choices feel simpler. Responses become slower but more accurate. Reactions lose their urgency. Many people misread this phase. They assume stopping pursuit equals laziness, indifference, or loss of drive. Internally, the opposite takes place. Men regain orientation toward themselves. Instead of constantly scanning outward for reactions and approval, they begin checking inward for alignment. They become aware of what feels right and what feels wrong. Those signals were always present, but chasing drowned them out. Pursuit forces men to ignore internal signals in favor of external results. When chasing stops, those signals return and become louder. Another internal shift appears as emotional regulation improves. Men feel less reactive. They are less pulled into emotional loops. They feel less pressure to fix, manage, or resolve everything immediately. They learn that not every discomfort needs action. Silence no longer feels dangerous. Delays no longer feel like failure. Distance no longer feels like loss. This steadiness changes how men experience themselves. They feel more grounded, more present, and more comfortable with pauses. They become more tolerant of uncertainty. This tolerance is not weakness, it is stability. Men also begin to recognize how much energy chasing consumed. Not only time, but mental focus, emotional strength, and attention. When that energy is no longer spent maintaining pursuit, it spreads into other areas of life. Thinking becomes clearer. Sleep improves. Emotional reactions soften. Life feels less rushed and less compressed. This is often the point where men reconnect with parts of themselves they ignored for a long time. They enjoy being alone without labeling it as loneliness. They enjoy routine without needing constant excitement. They appreciate silence without interpreting it as emptiness. This internal shift does not feel thrilling. It feels relieving. And relief disrupts systems that rely on urgency. At this stage, men are not focused on how others will react. They are simply noticing that life feels easier to manage, less forced and less performative. They stop tying their sense of worth to how quickly others respond. Messages that go unanswered do not trigger anxiety. Plans that fall apart do not feel like rejection. Quiet periods no longer demand explanation. This detachment is not emotional numbness. It is emotional containment. Men stop outsourcing their internal state to external validation. Before others notice the absence of pursuit, men notice the presence of inner stability. That stability reshapes how they move through the world. They speak when they genuinely mean something. They act when it aligns with their values. They step back when something feels wrong, without needing to defend or justify themselves. Once a man stops chasing outside himself, he stops abandoning himself inside. From that point, his behavior shifts naturally, not because he wants to prove anything, but because he no longer feels the need to earn it. Once the internal shift settles, external reactions follow, not because men announce a change or explain it, but because behavior always reveals intention. People sense the difference before they can describe it. Replies slow down, availability becomes limited, predictability fades. This absence creates tension, not conflict, but uncertainty. Many social and relational systems depend on consistent pursuit. They expect effort to continue. They assume attention will be provided. They rely on someone to keep momentum alive. When men stop chasing, those assumptions quietly fall apart. Others notice that the man who used to initiate no longer does. The man who once filled silence no longer rushes to do so. The man who kept things moving becomes still. This creates imbalance. People are used to responding to effort, not adjusting to its absence. Absence forces systems to recalibrate. Some people lean forward, they check in. They test availability without fully realizing why. Others step back. They disengage, they redirect their energy elsewhere. They fade out not from anger but because the dynamic no longer supports them. This sorting process happens on its own. Men do not force it, they do not manage it. They simply stop compensating for imbalance and the truth surfaces. This is where chasing once did invisible work. It reduced friction. It filled gaps. It softened uncertainty. When that labor ends, reality becomes visible. Without pursuit, there is no safety net, no reassurance loop, no guaranteed attention. What replaces it is responsibility. People must now contribute or accept distance. Men also become harder to read, not by strategy but naturally. They no longer signal interest through constant effort. Desire is no longer communicated through pursuit. This creates uncertainty, and uncertainty shifts dynamics, not in a manipulative way but in a grounding one. Non-pursuit communicates selectivity and boundaries. Men stop correcting misunderstandings during this phase. If silence is interpreted as disinterest, they allow that interpretation to exist. Not as punishment but as filtration. Those who need constant chasing to feel secure drift away. Those who value balance adjust. Men do not enforce this outcome. They allow it. That permission is new. Some connections grow stronger when chasing ends. They become more balanced and mutual. Others collapse quietly, not because they were attacked, but because they were no longer supported. When men stop chasing, reactions change, not because men became cold or distant, but because they stopped hiding imbalance. They remove the support beams. Structures that rely on constant effort cannot survive without it. Men are not controlling outcomes. They are allowing outcomes to show themselves. That is why reactions feel immediate. People sense when effort is no longer automatic. One of the first things to weaken when men stop chasing is performance. These are unspoken roles and expectations that were never discussed, only delivered. Chasing kept those roles stable and predictable. Men filled gaps before anyone noticed they existed. When pursuit stops, that invisible labor disappears. What collapses first are expectations built on constant output. The man who always starts conversations. The man who always reassures. The man who always explains. Once these roles stop being played, the system hesitates. Silence replaces reassurance. Boundaries replace flexibility. This is not cruelty, it is exposure. Men stop managing how they are perceived. They stop shaping their behavior to avoid misunderstanding. They stop overcommunicating to prevent discomfort. Not because they want confusion, but because constant clarification became part of the performance. When men stop chasing, they stop auditioning. They stop adjusting themselves to meet expectations they never agreed to. Some people mistake performance for care. They interpret reduced effort as lack of interest when it is actually lack of compliance. That misunderstanding reveals whether a connection was built on mutual desire or conditional effort. Relationships do not disappear overnight when men stop chasing. They reorganize. Without pursuit holding everything together, relationships are forced to stand on their own. Some adapt. Communication becomes clearer. Effort balances out. Mutuality replaces momentum. Others slow down and fade. Chasing often disguises misalignment as connection. Once it ends, reality appears. Men begin to see which connections respond to presence and which only responded to effort. Presence means showing up without pushing. Effort means constant initiation and reassurance. When pursuit ends, only presence remains, and presence reveals truth. Silence begins doing work that effort once handled. This is not strategic silence, but uncompensated silence. Men stop treating silence as a problem to solve. Silence slows interactions. It removes urgency. It forces clarity or exposes absence. When men stop rushing to explain themselves, others reveal their intentions through action. Silence becomes a natural filter. Those who depended on effort feel uncomfortable. Those who value alignment remain. Men are not deciding who stays. Silence does that work on its own. What men gain when they stop chasing is not dominance or control. It is stability. They stop living in constant reaction. Time feels less scattered. Choices feel cleaner. Trust in internal signals returns. Emotional independence strengthens. They invest based on evidence instead of hope. They choose fewer paths but commit fully to the ones they choose. They stop trading peace for possibility. They stop chasing outcomes that require self-neglect. Men reclaim authorship over their lives. They stop playing roles they never selected. They move with intention. They speak when it matters. They step back when something does not align. There is no announcement and no explanation, only direction. When pursuit ends, clarity begins. Nothing explodes. Energy stops leaking. Life feels quieter, not emptier. Men do not lose ambition. They release urgency. They stop forcing connection. They allow reality to show itself. And once that clarity settles, the world adjusts naturally.